All right, looks like we're going. Welcome back to another one of these things. We're just kind of talking about whatever comes to mind. Hope you're doing well and having a wonderful Monday. Recording this one a little bit late. Had an interview after work today and then uh, had some dinner and then had to stream for a bit. So uh, that hour and a half to 2 hours after work was just a little bit full for me today. So one of these coming up a little bit late. Though probably not like as late as some of the other ones have been. So probably not too bad. Anyway, hope your day is going great. One of the things that sort of came to my mind, and it's like I've had technical interviews for a bit. For a bit now. I usually get to about that point in any interview process before people are like, and well, maybe not quite you. And I always wonder a little bit, like, what parts of those interview processes like end up sort of making that call. Um, I know one of them recently, I likely didn't get it just because I'm not, I don't write, do technical writing as much as I do just like code and general like leadership and management stuff these days. Um, so like if I can't like exactly sound like a style guide and sound like a robot putting out words, then that can be like a red flag for like people who are just like, yeah, you need to consistently write like just a robot from this company to be able to put out stuff here. And I'm like, yeah, it's that I can't really fit that. I'm not quite good at that. Um, and another was just like I'm not like a marketing mindset type person. I don't come from that world. I come from a development space. So writing from a developer's perspective, teaching other developers how to write is kind of how I approach those kinds of things. So I never was like really great at just spinning like, hey, but this company's awesome, come buy my stuff. Geez. And that's just like me thinking about that stuff. Like I don't think anything looked particularly wrong about the code I was talking about or the topic necessarily. Just something about it didn't meet what the company I was interviewing with would want from somebody writing on their marketing team, technically. Even though it was a highly technical writing thing. But today was a different one. Today was one where I wasn't doing an interview for writing, which is some of the stuff that I've been interviewing for lately. There were a couple places where I was like, you know what, I wouldn't mind continuing to develop if it was for a better cause or a different industry than I'm currently in. And I got to like the technical phase. There's like five other people on a call, which I'm not terribly used to from like a panel interview type thing. I'm usually interviewing like with one or two other people. So it was kind of neat, or I guess different than I'm used to. I haven't had like a panel interview in like 2 or 3 years. Um, the year before COVID times, the 2019 was probably the last time. I think 2019 or 2018. I can't remember. It might have been 2018. It's the last time that I had a panel interview. It was just kind of interesting, just how structured it is. It's just like we're gonna keep passing the talking stick around a bit, so everybody gets a turn asking questions, and they're all different categories, which was kind of nice because it's able for me to be like, hey, we're switching topics and switching the people who were talking helped me understand that a little bit better. Um, but one of the things that kind of came up over this interview was just the concepts, just like really basic computer concepts, um, which I'm not very good with. Uh, Even though I'm a developer, I didn't come from like a or like a computer science background. Um, I never learned the words for a lot of the things that I do. Um, so like when people ask like when you would use something over something else, or what this pattern is called, or um, yeah, really the why or what something is named for type questions that you would normally get like in an entry level interview, those are the ones that I miss most often, because it's just like, why why do I need to know some of that? It doesn't actually apply to me doing like product development. coding type things. And understanding, like, I'm not saying like computer science isn't like important or necessary. It likely is for certain types of development, just not, excuse me, not always product development. And like how I ended up rising through my ranks after coming in as an associate dev is just really liking some tech and then using it so much you just learn some of the intricacies about it and you just get really good at using it in a high performance way. That's how I was with JavaScript. And then I ended up doing just some back end stuff before becoming a manager slash like architect position. But I never learned like all of the words and patterns associated with things. It's just, yeah, what you're describing makes sense to me. Here are the tweaks I'd make. And they'd be like, yeah, you just described this pattern. And I'm like, I don't know what that's called, but I think it's the right way forward. I can agree that what I'm seeing is correct, or it has a good application to our like problem here that we're facing. But like how people say like service oriented or microservice, I know that's a buzzword and I generally understand why you go with it, but I don't like have a definition for what that is. Like, in my opinion, it's good to have many services handling like single pieces of work, and each of them can work fairly independently of one another as long as what they take in is the same and what they put out is the same. Then you could just sort of plug into anything that can understand, either push into that input or accept that output. And like even went into the kind of the development space of that, just being like, and like even for just like from a developer perspective, it's like if you're just making changes upon changes upon changes, then you don't know at this level of the program, it's got like all this stuff here, and you update this one part of the code and it's like right here. Okay. And then each time that you make a change there, if you're just layering on top of something in a monolithic program, then it's really like here, this kind of effect. It was built off of everything that came before it, where down here is sort of that starting point. And then you keep building on top of that, and you think it's just impacting this slice all the way down, but it might have tendrils all the way across the program in a monolith. So when you're working with that microservice, that small thing that does one thing really, really well, it really is just that all the way down. When you're interpreting, okay, I made a code change, what is this impacting? None of the rest of the pipeline, none of the rest of the ecosystem, just how this service functions. So pretty good in that way. The main downside is just understanding how all of those services are interconnected. But like I understand those things and I'm able to describe fairly well why they work, one in just like a scalable performance way in a production ecosystem, but also just from like a development standpoint. Like if you have this monolithic program where a lot of these things might impact one another, it's really hard to get more people working on that same thing together. By having isolated pieces that can be updated definitely in their own kind of bubbles, and you can have people working on potentially the same feature in different locations without having to worry about stepping on each other's toes. So it has like benefits in both like actually going out the door and in development practice. And I'm like describing these things, but I don't know the names of a lot of these things that I'm describing. I know a little bit of the buzzwords, but that's about it. I'm more about like assessing a situation, seeing what I can do with the tools that I have, and then just building that. I don't need to know what it's called, really, because I could describe to you what it's doing. And like to that extent, like a name is important. Like being able to tell somebody what kind of that pattern is. But it's just like those things I don't really learn. Like I'm going to go in there and do that thing. Nobody told me that's what it's called and that's what everyone's doing these days. It's just that felt like the right solution for the time. I'll usually retroactively end up learning a name. Not learning the name and then learning how to do the thing. which is a little bit different than kind of like that kind of CS background. If people ask me like, can you describe this thing, the name of this thing? And I'm like, well, if you can describe to me a scenario where a solution like that might help, then like I could probably describe how to get there. But I don't know a definition for that word. But I would know how to implement it in practice. Patterns are kind of nice that way. They're patterns. They're supposed to be repeatable, generally understandable, because they need to be repeated over and over again. If they were complex, people wouldn't use them, or they'd find less complex ones to use. So it's just one of those interesting things. Like, I feel like I did a really good job on anything where it was like, tell me how you'd solve a problem. Or like, here are two concepts. What would you use? And it's not, as long as they weren't define this known thing, which is definitely a test for, did you get a computer science degree? And it's not really a test for, can you solve real world problems? And it's like, not saying that those things aren't important. It's like, I can piece together a sentence with my vocabulary, but if I knew some better words, then maybe I'd be able to put together a more cohesive or understandable solution. But it doesn't restrict me from creating a really good solution. Sometimes even the best solution. Like, if the word you used isn't like, it's what everybody else is using, but it's not like the best word for the situation, then no one's going to use it. That's the word everyone's using. Then somebody will use the new best word and it'll be like, wow, that's really insightful. But you never get there until you break that bubble. And you don't really break that until you're talking about practices and concepts and solving problems rather than defining words. Still, like, I get the value. It's just it's an odd thing to get, especially in like a senior software engineer type interview. Like, then I can cover a decent amount of ground. That like 90% of that interview went really well, in my opinion. And like 10% of it was like, yeah, I'm just floundering and it'd be better to go on to the next question. And like all of those were just like definitions. I was just like, gosh, like, it's one of those things like, if only I had a CS degree, that would have been a lot easier. But at the same time, the rest of it's just like, it's just practice. It's just practice and getting better at it and being able to learn. Like, that's probably the biggest thing. That a lot of those things are just like how would you search this? How would you search this unsorted list? And like, I was describing a binary search tree, but I forgot the name for binary search tree. Because I don't learn those things. It's just, what's a smart way to search a list for a duplicate value? So it's those kinds of things. It's like, I can describe a good solution, but I don't know the name of the solution all the time. Yeah. I think there was something else I was going to go with that, but it's an interesting thing. Because yeah, it's just at the end of the day, it's kind of like, as a senior dev, it's just kind of like, the only thing preventing me from answering those questions is not having a degree or having spent a lot of time learning vocabulary for the environment. And instead, I just jump in there and use the concepts without necessarily knowing the words. There's just a lot of definitions, but I don't know what they map to. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. You could say that a lot of it went okay, and a little bit of it didn't go so great. But if they want somebody that knows the words, then I guess they want somebody that knows the words. If you end up finding a place that's just like, you don't need to know the words, we just need to know that you know what to do, or you know how to learn to know what to do. I guess that might be a little bit of what I was going for there. Is if you don't know a word for a concept, then it's not too bad to just be like, word for this. Then you got your answer. That's not a senior level problem. A senior level problem is given these criteria and the tools that you have, how are you going to meet this kind of criteria? And that's not Googleable. If it is, you're probably just building something that somebody else has built, and that's fine. And maybe it has value in the space that you're in, and there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. But those probably aren't senior level problems. You need somebody who can think about something, hear something, and be like, you know what, that makes sense. But we have to be careful for this, and also incorporate these things into it. I know that's very vague, but at the same time, it's like those are the kinds of things that you want to, like somebody who can think and piece together things, and maybe having somebody who knows the words can help piece together things with those words. But yeah, it feels just like learning to learn, being able to communicate well, and knowing kind of how to approach problems, piece together solutions, rather than knowing your vocabulary. Those feel like senior level traits. And while that was most of the interview, it was kind of like, I get it. You want to throw these kinds of questions in there. And at the end, I was even like, how much of this interview was relevant to the position? And a bit of a response of, a lot of this is just because we need people who kind of know all of this stuff so that they can bring that to the table when solving problems. But at the same time, it's like there are things that I think anybody's just going to go look up. And there are some things that you can't look up. And if you have somebody there who can get close to an answer on the things you can't look up, that one's probably a winner. I'm not saying that's me in that interview scenario. It might be for them. Only they'll know. But from an organizational standpoint, going through that interview process, especially since I've been on the other side of that, finding people who can find those answers to problems or start piecing together the solution to a larger issue is way more important to me than having somebody who knows the vocabulary. But that's just me, I guess. Probably some other folks out there. I'm not that unique, not when it comes to solving problems. But I think we'll call it at that. Hope you're having a wonderful Monday, and that continues into a fantastic Tuesday. And we'll catch you in the next one. See ya.